You know that feeling when you find out you're dead? No? Well, I didn't either until 3 years ago. I'm Alexia, and apparently I died when I was 18. At least that's what my family told everyone. It's the strangest thing, discovering your own memorial service through someone else's Facebook photos. There I was, or rather, there I wasn't, in a framed photograph surrounded by white lilies. I'm allergic to lilies, by the way, which seems like the perfect metaphor for how little they actually knew me. My mother was dressed in black, dabbing at tears that probably took an hour of practice to perfect. My father stood stoic beside her, hand on her shoulder, the picture of grief-stricken parental unity. "We lost our beautiful daughter too soon," the caption read beneath a post my mother had written. "Taken by her rebellious choices and the wrong crowd." The wrong crowd being Daniel, the boy I fell in love with senior year. The boy from that side of town, who didn't fit into my family's carefully curated image. The boy who held me while I cried the night they told me to choose. Them or him. I chose him. I chose love. I chose freedom. And apparently, for that, they chose to kill me off. It wasn't a quick decision, I later found out. They'd planned it meticulously. First came the public posts about my concerning behavior and dangerous new friends. Then the vague references to me being lost and them praying for my return to the fold. Setting the stage, you see. Creating the narrative that would make my eventual death seem like the tragic but inevitable conclusion to a rebellious phase. They never specified how I died in their stories. It was always alluded to, whispers of overdoses or car accidents, depending on who was asking. The ambiguity served them well. It left room for imagination, for gossip that painted them as the victims of my poor choices rather than the architects of my exile. My Aunt Julia, Mom's sister who I'd always been close with, sat in the front row at the service, head bowed. I'd tried to call her when they kicked me out, but she never answered. Now I knew why. She believed I was gone. They all did. The worst part wasn't the elaborate lie. It wasn't even the crocodile tears or the sympathy casseroles that must have flooded our kitchen for weeks. It was the relief I could see behind my mother's performative grief. In the one candid shot someone had captured when she thought no one was looking, there was something like satisfaction in her eyes, as if my erasure had solved a problem for her. I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at those photos until my eyes burned, trying to process that while I'd been working double shifts and fighting to survive, they'd been burying an empty casket with my name on it. They hadn't just disowned me. They'd unmade me, erased me from existence itself. "You okay, babe?" Daniel had asked, finding me still frozen in front of my laptop at 3 a.m. I couldn't answer. How do you put words to discovering your own death? How do you explain to someone that the people who gave you life decided to take it away? Not literally, but symbolically, which in some ways felt even more violent. They hadn't just cut me off. They'd rewritten history. They'd denied my very existence. That night, I dreamt I was at my own funeral, screaming at the attendees that I was right there, alive, breathing. But no one could see me. I was a ghost, not because I had died, but because they had decided I should be dead to them. And somehow, they'd convinced an entire community to participate in this fiction. I woke up drenched in sweat, Daniel's arms around me, his voice in my ear saying, "I've got you. You're here. You're real." And I realized then that the opposite of love isn't hate, it's erasure. It's pretending someone never existed, and my family had mastered that art. I can still feel the plastic handles of that black trash bag cutting into my palm. 18 years old, standing on our front porch, their front porch, with everything I was allowed to keep bundled, up like garbage. Fitting, right? That's exactly how they made me feel. "Here's a bus ticket. my father had said, not meeting my eyes. "Your Aunt Meredith is expecting you. She'll let you stay for 2 weeks. After that, you're on your own." Aunt Meredith, who lived 3 states away. Aunt Meredith, who I'd met twice in my life. Aunt Meredith, who made it abundantly clear upon my arrival that the 2-week countdown had started the moment the door closed behind my father's Mercedes. So there I was, with $230 to my name, a high school diploma still fresh with ink, and absolutely no idea what came next. The first night in the shelter, I didn't sleep. How could I? The sounds were strange. Someone crying 2 beds over, someone else snoring, doors opening and closing at odd hours. I clutched my trash bag like it contained diamonds instead of 3 t-shirts and a pair of jeans. The next morning, I got up at 5 a.m. and started walking. No destination, just movement. By noon, I had 4 job applications filled out. Diner, gas station, grocery store, clothing shop. By the end of the week, I had 2 jobs. Morning shifts at Sunnyside Diner and evening shifts at Quick Mart. Between the 2, I made just enough to rent a room in a house with 4 other people, each of us separated by thin walls and thick determination. "You don't talk much about your family," my roommate Jade observed once, passing me a mug of dollar store coffee. "Don't have one," I replied, the lie easier than the truth. For months, I lived on ramen and determination. I worked 14-hour days, came home to shower, sleep for 5 hours, then did it all again. My hands cracked from dish soap at the diner and smelled perpetually of the cleaning spray at Quick Mart. But every night I counted my money, saved each $5 bill, each 10, tucking them into an envelope taped to the underside of my dresser drawer. College seemed like an impossible dream, but I applied for every scholarship I could find. Wrote essays during my lunch breaks, used the library computers to submit applications. When the acceptance letter came with a partial scholarship to the state university, I cried for the first time since leaving home. It took me 5 years to get my degree in graphic design, going part-time while still working. 5 years of falling asleep over textbooks. 5 years of saying no to parties, to trips, to anything that cost money or time I couldn't spare. 5 years of building myself from scratch. After graduation, I took an entry-level design job at a small marketing firm. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady, and it came with something I'd never had: health insurance. The first time I went to a dentist appointment and handed over my insurance card, I almost cried. It felt like the most adult thing I'd ever done. At night and on weekends, I built my portfolio, taking freelance jobs for almost nothing just to get the experience. My tiny apartment became my studio, kitchen table doubling as a desk, futon doubling as a client meeting area when necessary. I lived on coffee and dreams, each completed project a brick in the foundation I was building. 3 years later, I quit the marketing firm and launched my own design business. It was terrifying, like stepping off a cliff and building wings on the way down. The first month, I made half what I needed. The second month, 3/4. By the 6th month, I had a wait list of clients. Daniel came into my life during this upswing, a client at first, needing branding for his new restaurant. He asked me to dinner to discuss the project, but we both knew it was more. With him, for the first time, I felt seen. Not as a project or a charity case or a sad story, just as me, Alexia, a woman who had built something from nothing. "You're amazing," he told me once, watching me work late into the night on a client project. "Do you know that? The way you fought? For all this?" I didn't know how to tell him that fighting wasn't a choice. It was survival. That every day I woke up and chose to continue was a victory against those who had decided I was better off dead to them. That success wasn't just my goal. It was my revenge. By the time I turned 27, my design studio had 6 employees. I had a loft apartment downtown, a car that started every time, and a savings account with more digits than I'd ever imagined possible. From the outside, I looked like success personified. The self-made woman, the bootstrap puller, the American dream. No one saw the nightmares that still came. No one knew that I kept a go-bag by the door. Old habits of insecurity dying hard. No one understood why I triple-checked contracts, why I saved compulsively, why I flinched at certain phrases or songs or scents that took me back to that porch, that trash bag, that bus ticket. No one knew that despite everything I'd built, there was still a hole inside me, a family-shaped void that success couldn't fill. I had proven I could survive without them. I had proven I could thrive without them. But some nights, alone in my beautiful apartment, I still wondered why that hadn't been enough for them to want to keep me. It's weird how life-shattering news can come through such ordinary channels. I was scrolling through Instagram one Tuesday evening, half paying attention, when a DM popped up from a name I hadn't thought about in years. Becky Liu, my lab partner from high school chemistry. We hadn't spoken since graduation, since before my death. Alexia? Is this really you? I'm sorry if this is strange, but I had to reach out. I thought, we all thought. My thumb hovered over the message. I could ignore it. I'd built a life where the past stayed firmly in the past. But curiosity, or maybe something deeper, made me type back. Yes, it's me. Why? The response came quickly. Oh my God, we were told you died. Your mom. There was a memorial service. I was there. My stomach dropped. One thing to suspect, another to confirm. I asked her to tell me everything, and she did, sending screenshots of old Facebook posts, photos of the memorial service I'd seen years earlier, and something I hadn't seen. A fundraiser my mother had started in my memory for troubled teens. The irony would be laughable if it weren't so twisted. But it was. The video that broke me, my mother, standing at a podium at some community event, dabbing at tears as she spoke about losing her precious daughter to the dangers that await when young people stray from family values. She'd spun my story, my life, into a cautionary tale, a warning to other parents, a way to keep other daughters in line. She was such a good girl, my mother said in the video, her voice breaking perfectly on cue, until she wasn't. We tried everything to save her. Everything except loving me for who I was. Everything except accepting my choices. Everything except the truth. According to Becky, my death had become my mother's calling card in our community. She'd leveraged her grief into a position on the school board, campaigning on protecting our children from outside influences. She'd given interviews to local papers about the importance of strict parenting. She'd transformed my erasure into her elevation. And my sister Emma? She'd moved into my room after I died, worn my clothes, applied to the art school I'd always dreamed of attending but was told was impractical. She was living the life I'd been denied for wanting to live my own life. I can't believe you're alive, Becky wrote. What happened? Where have you been? What could I say? That I'd been exiled with nothing but a trash bag of belongings? That while they were mourning a daughter who wasn't dead, I was working 16-hour days just to afford a room in a shared apartment? That I'd clawed my way to success with no safety net, no family support, not even my own birth certificate, which they'd kept? It's complicated, I replied instead, but I'm very much alive. For days after, I fell into a research spiral. I created a fake profile to access community pages I'd been blocked from. I found more videos, more posts. My mother had become something of a minor celebrity in our hometown, the grieving parent turned advocate. There were actually people thanking her for sharing her painful story to help others. The more I discovered, the angrier I became. They hadn't just erased me. They'd replaced me with a fictional character, a cautionary tale, a plot device in my mother's story of righteous parenting. While I'd been surviving, they'd been thriving off my supposed death. Daniel found me one night, surrounded by printed screenshots, old yearbooks I'd retrieved from storage, notes I'd been making. "Babe, maybe it's time to let this go," he suggested gently. "You've built such an amazing life. Don't let them pull you back into their toxicity." He was right, in theory. I had moved on. I had succeeded. The best revenge is living well, isn't that what they say? But this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. My truth. They had stolen my past, manipulated my story, profited from my erasure. Did I really owe them my continued silence? The final straw came when I found the announcement for my family's upcoming 30th anniversary vow renewal ceremony, a big community event, scheduled for the following month. All the important people would be there. It would be, according to the local paper's write-up, a celebration of family values and enduring love, even through life's greatest trials, like the loss of their eldest daughter. That night, I made a decision. For 10 years, I had lived as a ghost of their creation. It was time for the ghost to return. It was time for the dead to speak. I booked a flight home, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips as I clicked purchase. For the first time in a decade, Alexia Chen was going home, not to seek love or approval or even forgiveness, but to reclaim my story, my truth, my life. As the confirmation email arrived in my inbox, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I'd spent so long running forward that I'd never looked back. Now I was choosing to turn around and face what had been chasing me all along, the lie of my own death. The flight home felt surreal. I kept thinking about that old saying, "You can't go home again," and how literally it applied to me. My home wasn't my home anymore. My family had declared me dead. I was returning not as a daughter, but as a ghost. I'd chosen my outfit carefully that morning. A crimson dress that hugged my curves, high heels that clicked authoritatively with each step, hair swept up in an elegant twist. Not my usual casual attire, but this wasn't a casual occasion. This was theater, and I was the surprise twist in the third act. The ceremony was being held at the Grand Maple Hotel downtown, the same place where I'd attended my senior prom. The last normal milestone before everything fell apart. I sat in my rental car outside, watching familiar faces drift through the glass doors. Former neighbors, family friends, relatives I hadn't seen in a decade. My phone buzzed. "Daniel, you don't have to do this. You can still turn around." But I did have to do this. Not for them, for me. For the 18-year-old girl with the trash bag. For every night I'd cried myself to sleep wondering what I'd done to deserve being erased. For every holiday spent alone. For every lie they'd told. "I'll call you after," I texted back, then turned off my phone. The hotel lobby was filled with the soft hum of conversation and the scent of flowers. Lilies again, of course. A large sign directed guests to the Chen 30th anniversary celebration in the grand ballroom. I followed it, heart pounding in time with my footsteps. At the entrance stood my cousin Michael, checking names off a list. He'd grown older, we all had, but I recognized him instantly. Would he recognize me? I stepped up to the table, offered a smile. "Hi, Michael." He glanced up, that customer service smile fixed on his face. "Name for the guest list?" "Alexia Chen." His pen paused midair. He looked up slowly, confusion giving way to shock as recognition dawned. The clipboard slipped from his fingers, hitting the table with a clatter that drew stares. "That's not... You can't be..." He stammered, face draining of color. "Surprise," I said softly. "I'm not actually dead." Before he could recover, I moved past him into the ballroom. It was decorated beautifully, white and gold everywhere, crystal chandeliers casting warm light over round tables with elaborate centerpieces. At the front, a stage was set up with a microphone stand. Photos of my parents through the years were projected on a large screen. Their wedding, family vacations, holidays. There I was in some of the earlier photos, my face smiling out from family portraits taken before everything fell apart. My presence in the early images and absence from the later ones created the perfect visual timeline of their lie. I spotted my sister Emma first, stunning in a blue dress, laughing with a group of friends. She'd grown up so much, 24, now, the age I'd been when she was just 14. Did she know the truth, or had she believed the lie? And then I saw them, my parents. My mother resplendent in gold, accepting congratulations from well-wishers. My father beside her, distinguished, in his tuxedo, hand possessively at her waist. They looked exactly as I remembered, yet somehow like strangers. I waited until the MC, my father's old college friend, asked everyone to take their seats for the anniversary couple's entrance. Waited until the room quieted, until all attention, focused on the doors through which my parents would make their grand entrance. Then I moved deliberately to the center of the room and simply stood there, directly in the path they would take to reach the stage. The doors opened. My parents entered, arms linked, beaming as applause erupted around them. They made it 3 steps before my mother saw me. She froze mid-step, her smile vanishing so abruptly it was as if someone had flipped a switch. My father, confused by her sudden stop, followed her gaze. When he saw me, his face went through an extraordinary series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, recognition, and finally, pure panic. The applause faltered as people noticed something was wrong. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Someone gasped. Someone else said my name in a shocked whisper. "Hello, Mom?" "Dad," I said, my voice carrying in the sudden quiet. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible." My mother's hand flew to her throat. "This isn't possible," she whispered. "And yet here I am," I replied. Not dead after all. The silence that followed was deafening. Then chaos erupted. People stood from their seats, craning to see. Phones came out, capturing the moment. My Aunt Julia pushed through the crowd, hand over her mouth, tears already streaming. "Alexia?" she choked out. "Is it really you?" I nodded, not trusting my voice suddenly. She rushed toward me, pulling me into a fierce hug that smelled of the same perfume she'd worn my entire childhood. "We thought," they said. "Oh my God, where have you been?" She sobbed against my shoulder. "Exactly where they left me," I answered, loud enough for my parents to hear. Building a life after they threw me away. My father recovered first, stepping forward, voice lowered in that authoritative tone I remembered so well. "Alexia, this is hardly the time or place." "For the truth?" I interrupted. "I think it's exactly the time and place, Dad. You've had 10 years to tell it. Now it's my turn." From my purse, I pulled out the evidence I'd brought. My driver's license, business cards, recent photos of my life. Physical proof of my continued existence that countered their decade of lies. "I didn't die," I announced, turning to address the stunned crowd. I was discarded, disowned, erased. And while I was fighting to survive, they were telling you all I was dead, using my tragic end to gain your sympathy, your support, your admiration for their strength in the face of loss. My mother finally found her voice, though it shook with either rage or fear, perhaps both. "You have no right to come here and ruin our special day with these falsehoods." I laughed then, couldn't help it. Falsehoods? That's rich coming from the woman who held a memorial service for her very much alive daughter. I gestured to myself. "Do I look like a falsehood to you? Am I a ghost? A hallucination?" The crowd was absolutely silent now. all eyes darting between us like spectators at a tennis match. In their faces, I saw confusion giving way to understanding and then to horror as the truth sank in. "I think," I said, meeting each shocked gaze around the room, "that a lot of you have been lied to. And I'm here to set the record straight. The truth has a weight to it, a substance. You can actually feel it land when it's finally spoken after years of silence. That's what happened in that ballroom. Truth falling like anvils, crushing the carefully constructed lies that had stood in its place for a decade. When I was 18, I began, my voice steadier than I'd thought possible. I fell in love with someone my parents didn't approve of, not because he was dangerous or cruel, but because he came from the wrong neighborhood, the wrong background. They gave me an ultimatum, him or them. When I refused to end my relationship, they packed my belongings in garbage bags and put me on a bus with a one-way ticket out of town. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Uncomfortable shifts in seats. Eyes darting toward my parents, who stood, frozen like statues, their anniversary celebration derailed by the ghost of their greatest deception. What I didn't know then, I continued, was that they'd already decided to erase me completely, not just from their home, but from existence itself. They told you all I had died, held a memorial service, accepted your condolences, your casseroles, your sympathy cards, all while knowing I was very much alive. My sister Emma pushed forward suddenly, face contorted with emotion. "That's not true. You ran away. You abandoned us, and then..." "And then what, Emma?" I asked, turning to face her directly. "I died in some tragic, vague way that Mom and Dad never quite explained in detail? Is that what they told you?" Uncertainty flickered across her face. She looked to our parents, silently pleading for backup, for explanation. "Emma," I said more softly, "you were 14 when I left. I tried to call you for months afterward. Did they tell you that? Did they tell you I emailed, wrote letters, all returned or blocked? Or did they just tell you I was gone forever, they said?" She faltered, looking lost suddenly. "They said you got involved with drugs, that you ran off with that boy, that there was an accident. And yet here I stand," I replied. "Very much alive, very successful, and very sober. They lied to you, Emma, just like they lied to everyone, in this room." I turned back to my parents, who had finally broken their shocked stillness. My father had his arm around my mother's shoulders now, both of them huddled together like survivors of a disaster, which, in a way, they were. Their narrative was crumbling around them in real time. "You know what hurts the most?" I asked them directly. "Not that you kicked me out. Not even that you cut me off completely. It's that you couldn't just let me go. You had to destroy me, unmake me, turn me into a cautionary tale." "We were protecting Emma," my mother hissed, finding her voice at last. "After what you did..." "What I did? Fall in love? Make my own choices? Refuse to be controlled? Those aren't crimes, Mom. They're called growing up." I turned to address Emma again. "And you, my little sister, you moved into my room after I died, didn't you? Took my things, wore my clothes." My voice caught slightly. "Applied to the art school they forbade me from even considering. Tell me, was it easier to fill my shoes once they convinced you I was dead?" Emma's face crumpled. "They said you wanted me to have your things, that you'd want me to carry on for you." "How convenient," I said quietly. "Did you ever question why there was no grave? No death certificate? No details about how I supposedly died?" I could see the doubt creeping into her eyes now, the first cracks in the foundation of lies she'd built her adolescence upon. My father stepped forward then, voice dropping into that authoritative tone he'd always used to end discussions. "That's enough, Alexia. You've made your point. Perhaps we should continue this conversation privately." "No," I cut him off firmly. We're done with privacy. Privacy is what allowed this lie to grow. Privacy is what protected you while isolating me. We're going to have this conversation right here, in front of all the people you've been lying to for 10 years. I turned to face the stunned guests, many of whom had known me since childhood. My parents didn't just lie to you about my death. They leveraged your sympathy to elevate themselves in this community. My mother joined the school board on a platform of protecting children, after supposedly losing her own. My father accepted your support, your business connections, your kindness, all based on a tragedy that never happened. Aunt Julia, still beside me, spoke up then. Richard, Catherine, is this true? Did you make up Alexia's death? While she was out there somewhere alive? My father's silence was damning. My mother's face had gone rigid, eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route. I would have stayed gone, I told them quietly. I built a whole new life without your help. I'm successful, happy, loved. I didn't come back for reconciliation or forgiveness. I came back because you stole my narrative. You turned me into a character in your story, instead of allowing me to be the author of my own. I looked around the room, meeting the shocked, uncomfortable gazes of family friends, relatives, community members. I'm not asking any of you to choose sides. I'm just asking you to know the truth. I'm alive. I was never lost to drugs or rebellion or whatever vague tragedy they invented. I was discarded for being independent, and then erased because it was more convenient than admitting what they'd done. The silence in the room was deafening. Then someone in the back, I couldn't see who, began to clap slowly. Others joined, the applause spreading like ripples in water. Not celebration, but acknowledgement. Recognition of truth finally spoken. My mother's face contorted with rage. How dare you come here and turn these people against us with your twisted version of events? I'm not here to turn anyone against you, I replied calmly. I'm here to reclaim my existence. The rest is between you and them. I gestured to the crowd of people who had believed their lies for a decade. I wonder how many of them contributed to that memorial fund you started in my name. The one that paid for your kitchen renovation. The gasp that went through the room told me that particular detail had hit home. My father took a step toward me, face darkening dangerously. You've said quite enough. Actually, I interrupted, I've only just started, but I think my point is made. I smiled, a genuine smile that seemed to unnerve him more than anger would have. Congratulations on 30 years of marriage. That's quite an achievement. Almost as impressive as successfully faking your daughter's death for 10 of those years. There's something incredibly freeing about finally speaking your truth after years of silence. It feels like putting down a heavy backpack you didn't even realize you'd been carrying. Suddenly, your shoulders feel lighter, your spine straightens. You can breathe deeper. That's how I felt, standing in that ballroom surrounded by the wreckage of my family's carefully constructed fiction. For 10 years, I'd carried the weight of their rejection, their erasure. Now I'd given it back to them, and I could feel myself rising, unfettered. People were moving around us now, some leaving in uncomfortable haste, others gathering in shocked clusters to whisper and stare. A few approached me cautiously, like I might be a mirage that would vanish if they came too close. My childhood friend Sarah reached me first, tears streaming down her face. I sang at your memorial, she said, voice breaking. I sang Amazing Grace because your mom said it was your favorite hymn. I laughed softly. I always hated that song. I know, she whispered. That's why it felt so strange. More people came forward, my old debate team coach, my father's secretary who had always slipped me chocolate when I visited his office, neighbors who had watched me grow up. Each one with a different piece of the elaborate lie my parents had constructed. Each one processing the shock of seeing a ghost made flesh. Through it all, my parents remained frozen near the entrance, surrounded by a small, protective circle of their closest friends who were attempting damage control. My father was on his phone, gesturing angrily. My mother sat rigidly in a chair someone had brought her, a handkerchief pressed to her lips, the perfect picture of distress. I could read their strategy from across the room. Make me the villain. The unstable daughter returned to ruin their special day out of spite. The troubled girl whose mental health issues had caused them so much pain. They were already spinning a new narrative. I could see it happening in real time. But it was too late. The truth was out, messy and uncomfortable and undeniable. I was standing there, breathing, speaking, existing despite their best efforts to erase me. Emma approached me hesitantly, her earlier confidence shattered. Up close, I could see the echoes of the 14-year-old she'd been when I last saw her, hidden beneath the confident makeup and sophisticated hairstyle. "Did you really try to contact me?" she asked, voice small. "Every week for the first year," I said gently. "Phone calls, emails, even letters. I sent birthday cards that came back marked return to sender." She swallowed hard. "I never got them. They said you didn't want anything to do with us anymore. That you'd chosen your new life." "I didn't choose to lose you, Emma. That choice was made for both of us." Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm wearing your necklace," she whispered, touching the small gold pendant at her throat. "Mom gave it to me after they said you were gone. Said you would have wanted me to have it. I recognized it immediately. The delicate sunflower, pendant our grandmother had given me for my 16th birthday. I'd left it behind that day, one of many precious things I hadn't been allowed to take. "It looks good on you," I said, fighting the urge to touch it. That necklace belonged to a different Alexia now, the one who had died in this family's narrative. I had become someone else entirely in the decades since. People were still watching us, phones surreptitiously recording what would undoubtedly become the scandal of the decade in our small community. I didn't care. Let them document. Let them see. Truth deserved witnesses. My father finally broke away from his huddle and approached, face set in stern lines I remembered all too well from childhood confrontations. "You've made your point," he said tightly. "Now I think it's time for you to leave." "Are you kicking me out again, Dad?" I asked, not bothering to lower my voice. It didn't work so well the first time, did it? "This is a private family celebration that you've disrupted enough," he insisted. I smiled. "But I am family, aren't I? Or did the memorial service make that official? That I'm no longer your daughter? I'm curious about the logistics of it all. Did you file a death certificate? That would be fraud, you know?" His jaw tightened. "We never claimed legal death. We simply allowed people to believe you were gone." "How convenient," I replied. All the sympathy of grieving parents with none of the legal complications. Around us, the celebration was effectively over. The band had stopped playing. The catering staff hovered uncertainly near their stations. Guests were departing in droves, the anniversary party imploding spectacularly in the wake of my resurrection. My mother finally approached, having composed herself enough to put on a public face. "Why now?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "After all these years, why come back just to humiliate us?" It was such a telling question. Not, "Why did you come back?" but "Why did you come back to humiliate us?" As if my existence itself was an act of aggression against them, as if I couldn't possibly have any purpose beyond hurting them. "I'm not here for you," I told her simply. "I'm here for me, to reclaim my story, to speak my truth. Your humiliation is just a byproduct of your own choices." She flinched as if I'd slapped her. Perhaps, in a way, I had. For the first time in my life, I wasn't seeking her approval or love. I wasn't trying to fit into the narrow parameters she'd set for acceptable daughterhood. I was simply existing on my own terms, and that was the one thing she had never been able to tolerate. You should go, my father repeated, more firmly this time. You've done enough damage. I'm going, I assured him. I got what I came for, and I had. I hadn't come expecting tearful reconciliation or profound apologies. I had come to be seen, to transform from ghost to flesh, to take back my narrative from those who had twisted it to serve their own purposes. Mission accomplished. I turned to go, but paused, meeting my sister's confused, tear-filled eyes one more time. Emma, when you're ready to hear the full story, my real story, not their version, I'll be around for a few more days. The Grand E. Maple has great coffee in their lobby. I slipped her my business card, watching her take it with trembling fingers. The choice is yours. As I walked toward the exit, Aunt Julia fell into step beside me. I would never have believed they could do something like this, she said, voice shaking. All these years, the grief support group Catherine joined, the memorial fund, it was all a lie. Not all of it, I replied. They really did throw me away. That part was true. She squeezed my arm. I should have questioned more. Should have tried to find you. I'm so sorry, Alexia. I patted her hand. You believed what they wanted you to believe. Everyone did. At the ballroom doors, I turned back for one final look. The anniversary celebration was in shambles. Guests departing, decorations abandoned, the celebratory cake untouched on its table. My parents stood isolated in the center of it all, the picture of dignified suffering they'd perfected over a decade of playing the bereaved. But something had shifted. I could see it in the way people moved around them now, the slight distance, the questioning glances, the whispered conversations. Their perfect facade had cracked, and everyone could see the ugliness beneath. I didn't feel victorious as I walked out of that hotel. I didn't feel vengeful or satisfied in the way I'd imagined I might. What I felt was something much quieter, much more powerful. I felt free. Free of seeking their approval. Free of wondering what I'd done wrong. Free of the ghost they'd made, of me. I stepped into the bright afternoon sunlight, took a deep breath, and called Daniel. It's done, I said when he answered. I'm coming home. Because that's what I had now, a real home. Not a mausoleum built on lies, but a life constructed of truth, brick by honest brick. A life they had tried to prevent me from having, and failed. I drove away from the hotel. I glanced in the rearview mirror at the town that had once been my entire world. It looked smaller now, less significant. The place where Alexia Chen had supposedly died, but where, in reality, she had finally, completely come alive. It started with an email from a podcast producer 3 weeks after I returned home from the anniversary showdown. Ms. Chen, your story has been making waves through several private community forums. Would you be interested in sharing it more broadly? Our show, Unwritten. Stories of resilience, focuses on people who've overcome extraordinary circumstances. My first instinct was to delete it. I'd done what I set out to do. Reclaimed my narrative, spoken my truth, removed the power my family had held over me for a decade. Did I really need to broadcast that pain further? You don't have to decide right now, Daniel said as we discussed it over dinner. But think about how many others might be going through similar situations. Not exactly being declared dead, obviously, but being erased by their families for who they love or who they are. He had a point. The day after I'd crashed the anniversary party, my phone had nearly exploded with messages. Old friends, distant relatives, even people I barely remembered from high school reaching out, some to express shock, others to share their own stories of family rejection. It seemed my dramatic return from the dead had struck a nerve far beyond the personal drama with my parents. Emma had actually shown up at the hotel coffee shop the next morning, eyes red-rimmed but determined. I need to know everything, she'd said. Everything they didn't tell me. For 3 hours, We talked, really talked, for the first time as adults. I learned that after my death, she'd been kept on an even tighter leash than before, my tragic fate used as justification for monitoring her friends, activities, even her college applications. It was always, "We can't lose you too," or, "After what happened to your sister," she explained. I never questioned it, because why would they lie about something so huge? By the end of our conversation, something had shifted between us, not forgiveness exactly, since she hadn't been the architect of the deception, but understanding. A tentative bridge across the decade-long chasm that had separated us. "Do the podcast," she texted me a week later. "People should hear this story. I wish I had." So I did. The recording session was both harder and easier than I'd expected. Harder because articulating the full scope of the betrayal, laying it out chronologically, filling in all the details, made me relive each painful moment. Easier because finally, the story was entirely mine to tell. "What surprised you most about being erased?" the host asked toward the end of our 3-hour session. I thought carefully before answering. "How thoroughly people accepted it," I said finally. "Not just my death, but the narrative around it. No one questioned why there was no funeral, no grave, no obituary in the paper. People filled in those blanks themselves with assumptions that fit my parents' implications. It taught me how easily reality can be rewritten if the lie is more comfortable than the truth." When the episode aired a month later, titled "The Girl Who Died, Alexia Chen's Story of Family Erasure and Resurrection," I couldn't bring myself to listen to it immediately. I sat with my laptop open to the podcast page for nearly an hour before Daniel gently pressed play and sat beside me, hand steady on my back as my voice filled the room. The response was overwhelming. The episode quickly became the show's most downloaded of the season. My inbox filled with messages, some from journalists wanting exclusives, but most from people sharing their own experiences of family rejection, erasure, being cut off for loving the wrong person or choosing the wrong path. "My parents haven't spoken to me since I came out 5 years ago," one message read. "Hearing your story made me realize I'm not the one who should be ashamed. My ultra-religious family holds a prayer service for my lost soul each year on my birthday since I left the church," wrote another. "I've never had the courage to confront them about it until now." What had begun as a personal reckoning was becoming something much larger, a platform for discussing the insidious ways families control, manipulate, and sometimes erase members who don't conform to expectations. 3 months and 2 follow-up interviews later, I received an unexpected email from a literary agent. "Your story has resonance beyond the podcast medium," she wrote. "Would you consider developing it into a memoir?" The idea was both terrifying and strangely appealing. Could I transform this trauma into something lasting, something that might help others navigate their own family ruptures? I discussed it with my therapist. Yes, I finally started therapy after all these years, prompted by the emotional aftermath of the confrontation. "Just because you've spoken your truth doesn't mean you've processed it," she pointed out. "Writing could be healing, but it will also mean living in that story again for months." She was right, but something told me it would be different this time. When my parents controlled the narrative, revisiting the past had felt like drowning. Now that I owned my story, perhaps writing it would feel more like swimming. Purposeful movement through difficult waters, but with my head above the surface, breathing freely. I began writing in the early mornings before work, Daniel bringing me coffee and leaving me to the gentle click of keyboard keys. The words came more easily than I'd expected, flowing from some long-dammed place inside me. I wrote about the trash bag, the bus ticket, the shelter nights, about building a business from nothing, about holidays spent alone, about checking social media through fake accounts to glimpse the family life continuing without me. And I wrote about the freedom that came with finally standing in my truth, not as the cautionary tale they'd made me, but as the success story I'd written for myself. One difficult day at a time. 6 months into writing, I received another unexpected message. This one from Emma. "Mom and Dad are getting divorced," it read simply. "Dad moved out last week. I thought you should know." I sat with that information, turning it over like a strange object found on a beach. Their perfect marriage, the one they'd been celebrating, with such pomp when I'd interrupted, had collapsed in the aftermath of my return. The revelation of their decade-long lie had apparently cracked the foundation beyond repair. I felt no satisfaction at this news, no vindictive pleasure, just a quiet acknowledgement that truth, once spoken, continues to reverberate long after the speaker has left the room. The podcast had opened unexpected doors. I was invited to speak at conferences about family estrangement, at college seminars, about building resilience after trauma. Each time I told my story, it became slightly easier to carry. Each time I met someone who had experienced similar rejection, I felt less alone in what I'd endured. "You've created something powerful here," my literary agent said after reading the first half of my manuscript. "This isn't just about your parents' betrayal anymore. It's about what happens after betrayal. How we rebuild, how we reclaim our voices, how we transform pain into purpose." She was right. Somewhere along the way, my story had evolved from one of victimhood to one of empowerment. Yes, I had been discarded, erased, lied about, but I had also survived, thrived, and eventually returned to shatter the fiction they'd created in my absence. The memoir was published 18 months after the infamous anniversary confrontation, titled Resurrection, A Daughter's Journey from Erasure to Empowerment. The cover featured a phoenix rising from ashes. Cliché, perhaps, but sometimes clichés exist because they perfectly capture a truth. On the day of my first book signing, I looked out at the line of people waiting, some with their own dog-eared copies, others purchasing new ones at the store's counter. So many faces, each with their own story of loss, rejection, or erasure, each seeking their own path to resurrection. As I opened the first book to sign, a familiar figure stepped up to the table. Emma, holding a copy already creased from reading. "You came," I said, surprised. She nodded. "I've been following everything, the podcast, the interviews. I wanted to be here for this." She hesitated, then added, "I'm proud of you, Alexia, for speaking up, for writing this. Mom still won't discuss it, and Dad's moved to Florida, but I needed to hear your truth." I signed her copy with trembling fingers. "To Emma, here's to writing our own stories from now on. Love, your very much alive sister." As she moved away, another reader stepped forward, book clutched nervously against her chest. "Your podcast changed my life," she said quietly. "I've been estranged from my family for 8 years. Hearing your story gave me permission to stop apologizing for existing on my own terms." This was happening more and more. People approaching not just to have a book signed, but to share how my story had intersected with their own. Each time, I felt the weight of responsibility, but also the profound gift of connection. Later that night, after the signing, I found myself alone in my hotel room, surrounded by the quiet aftermath of a momentous day. I opened my laptop and navigated to the website where I'd posted the entire digital archive of my journey. Podcast episodes, interviews, articles, and now information about the book. The site's simple name reflected everything the journey had been about. TheGirlWhoLived.com. Because that's what I was. Not the tragic cautionary tale my parents had fabricated. Not the ghost they'd tried to make of me, but a woman who had survived erasure and emerged stronger. Voice intact. Story reclaimed. I scrolled through the comments section, reading messages from others who were finding their way back from similar erasures, some by family, some by partners, some by entire communities that had declared them unwelcome. "How do you stop wanting their approval?" one commenter had asked. I thought carefully before typing my response. the hard-won wisdom of my journey distilled into words I hoped might help someone else find their way. You don't stop wanting it overnight. But each day you live authentically. Each time you speak your truth, even when your voice shakes. Each moment you build something beautiful from the ruins they left you in. You're reclaiming a piece of yourself they tried to take. Eventually, you realize their approval was always too small a thing to contain who you truly are. I hit post, closed my laptop, and stood by the hotel window, looking out at the city lights below. Somewhere out there, people were reading my words, listening to my voice, perhaps finding courage in my journey from erasure to empowerment. The girl who died had become the woman who lived to tell the tale. And in the telling, she had found not just her voice, but her purpose.